Hello and welcome again to another video by Econo Insight. This video will cover the Cobb-Douglas production function. Before we dive into this, let's refresh that what is meant by GDP and GDP per capita. GDP essentially measures final output, and GDP per capita measures a country's living standard. So now that we have recalled these two concepts, let's dive into the Cobb-Douglas production function. The Cobb-Douglas production function is a formula which relates outputs to inputs. To have certain outputs, you must have certain inputs, right? Then only then you can produce the outputs. That's the intuition behind it. In our Cobb-Douglas production function, our inputs are capital, labor, and the level of technology. How does these three components, capital, labor, and level of technology, they are combined and they produce a certain output? So the formula we use for the Cobb-Douglas production function is below here. So we have YT, I'm going to explain what each variable means, equals AT multiplied by KT to the power of beta multiplied by LT to the power of 1 minus beta. So now let's dissect this. YT is the economy's output, which is the GDP. So I'm just going to write GDP here. GDP at time t. The t below here is just indicating time. So this is y is output or GDP, so GDP at time t. AT is multi-factor productivity. It's something similar like the level of technology, but not really. But it's something similar. Multi-factor productivity is how efficient are we able to combine capital and labor to produce output. So since it's AT, then this means multi-productivity at time t. If you still don't grasp the concept of multi-factor productivity, please watch the video regarding what multi-factor productivity is. Next is KT. KT is the economy's capital inputs at time t. Economy's capital inputs at time t. And YLT is simply the economy's labor input. I'm just going to use another color. Economy's labor input. Don't forget at time t. So we can sort of get the intuition here. We're trying to get output, which is YT, and to do that we combine AT, which is our multi-factor productivity, like our technology. We have KT, our capital, amount of capital, and LT, which is our amount of labor. We combine these inputs here to get our output here. And some of you now might be wondering, what beta here? So KT to the power of beta. What does beta mean? What does 1 minus beta mean? So, beta is simply the share of output paid to capital. I'm going to give a concrete example after this. And 1 minus beta is simply the share of output paid to labor. So now with that, we have formed our Cobb-Douglas production function. We have YT, we have defined every variable here, and we have defined beta and 1 minus beta. So now let's see how this works. So let's see if I'm going to first explain what beta and 1 minus beta means concretely. Let's say beta is 0.3. That means owners of capital receives 30% of output, and owners of labor, which are the people itself, the owners of labor, right? Labor earnings is at 70%. Why? Because 1 minus 0.3 is 0.7. So this I'm going to write it here, owners of labor receives 70% of output. So owners of labor is simply labor earnings, just to make it more simple. So that is how output is paid to capital. The share of output paid to capital and the share of output paid to labor. So that's that. Now, let's put numbers into our Cobb-Douglas function so we can really grasp it. So again, let's recall our Cobb-Douglas production function, which is YT equals AT multiplied by KT to the power of beta multiplied by LT to the power of 1 minus beta. Now let's assume that our multi-factor productivity AT is equal to 10. Our beta is equal to 0.3. And let's suppose our KT, our capital input is 5, and our labor input is 100. So how do we plug this in? So it's just simply plugging in. We have our output, which we're trying to find out. We plug in the numbers, 10. KT is 5, right? I'm just going to put multiplied by 5 to the power of 0.3 multiplied by 100 to the power of 1 minus 0.3, which is 0.7. We plug this all into the calculator and we get that our output at time t is 407.1. So there we can see we plug in our inputs here and we then get our output, which is YT. So that is what the Cobb-Douglas production function is, the variables defined, and how it works. To see the certain properties, because Cobb-Douglas production function has certain properties, and one of those most famous properties is constant returns to scale. In order to know more about this, a very important property, watch the next video about constant returns to scale. Thank you for watching, and I hope it helps.